Silicon Valley has never developed a sense of past, of a common community, of a shared history. And perhaps that'll come with time. Unfortunately, the Valley is built on being forever young, so it may never happen. And I think that creates a sense of rootlessness. I don't think people feel as though they're truly part of Silicon Valley as a whole. They may feel part of the electronics revolution, part of the company they work for, but they never feel grounded in this area. There's a continuous sense of rootlessness. In their hearts, I think they believe that if things change, they'll leave.
Early in a winter morning, Silicon Valley. Progress and success carry many compromises. Hours spent on a crowded street or freeway, set against a steady supply of jobs. The growth of knowledge and riches against exhaustion of the spirit. Cheap thrills against real achievement, and all of the trade-offs that go with modern urban living. This is not a story of millions of dollars, kings and queens, or of technical wizards, although they're all in it. This is a photograph of Silicon Valley at middle age, no longer innocent and having to decide what's important and what is not. Sometime in the late 70s, Silicon Valley caught the media's fancy. High tech and electronics were seen as the key to the future, and the Valley had the highest concentration of that kind of industry in the world. By 1984, the success story of the American economy had become so entrenched that politicians of both parties wanted their campaigns associated with it.
Ladies and gentlemen, the President of the United States and Mrs. Reagan.
My dream for America, and I know it's one you share, is to be the kind of success story that this valley has. See that story multiply 1,000,000 times.
News crossed the ocean. The Queen of England was one of many dignitaries to visit.
I knew before we came that we had exported many of our traditions to the United States, but I had not realized before that weather was one of them.
Suddenly, in 1985, many high-flying companies lost millions of dollars, and almost 12,000 workers lost their jobs. It was the worst recession the high-tech industry of the Valley had ever suffered, at a time when the rest of the U.S. economy was doing well. And even during the Valley's better times, signs had been appearing that forced questions on the price of prosperity. Inadequate planning for the rapid rate of development had contributed to a severe traffic problem and sky-high housing prices. There was also air and water pollution in the Valley of Heart's Delight, as the place used to be called. The race to be number one was taking its toll on the population. Alcohol and drug abuse came with the high incomes and the frenetic lifestyles. In 1985, Santa Clara County's average household income was one of the 2 highest in the country, so its problems could be considered trivial. Yet at the center of Valley life are these dilemmas, similar to the ones facing all of the United States. Their resolution in this new model of industrial development will suggest the shape of tomorrow's world. A highly regarded journalist who grew up in this area, Michael Malone, will offer some thoughts and comments throughout this program. He has written The Big Score, the billion-dollar story of Silicon Valley, and has also worked as an investigative reporter.
There's a real tendency to not take the problems of Silicon Valley seriously, particularly if you're outside Silicon Valley. You see these glamorous young people with lots of money to spend and definitely spending it, seem to be having a good time, seem to be resistant to most recessions. It's hard to feel real bad about the problems of Silicon Valley, but I think we should, because as Silicon Valley goes, so goes the rest of American industry. If things go bad here, whether you like this world or not, it's going to impact your life.
A lonely worker takes apart the assembly lines at a factory in San Jose, resigned to the fact that the place where he works is closing down.
I'm sorry to see us close, because I got my 5 years in. It's a pretty good company to work for. Nice people.
Melvin Wagner's situation is indicative of a trend that will have serious implications for the United States. Valley companies have been transferring work offshore to countries where labor is cheaper.
I was shocked, though. Really, I was shocked that they said we were closing. Couldn't believe it.
The plant was part of the high-tech industry of Silicon Valley. When it was in operation, it built printers for computers in an efficient, profitable way. Months earlier, before the plant closed down, the Employees Club had celebrated their last party together.
I want to welcome you to our last annual Halloween party. I know for some of you this may come as a shock, but we are closing. This is the last time we'll be doing this.
They've always told us, and we can see from in here, that the company was well off. They've always told us that the company had a lot of money and everything like that. And then coming off of a fine year like we did last year, it was very surprising that they told us that we were going to be closing down.
My reaction, the way I felt, well, I don't believe that's the American way.
It's been a common business practice in this country that only those plants that are making money for the companies will remain open in the long run. But the closure of profitable plants is a fairly recent development.
We have a team of our people that are in Hong Kong right now. The philosophy that we're using is that we're lifting the operation intact out of San Jose, moving it into Hong Kong, and our people are there to make sure that everything is done exactly as it was done in San Jose.
Foreign competition, particularly from Japan, Taiwan, and Korea, and the downturn in the market have hurt this company, along with many others in the valley. Looking for ways to cut costs, the management decided to move some production to the Far East. Labor costs there are lower, and there are significant tax advantages.
Oh no! Everybody take cover! Down! It's Rambo! Oh no! I know some of you are upset by this closing, but this is ridiculous! Oh no!
On the human side, the most interesting aspect of this story is the lack of bitterness among the 350 workers who are seeing their jobs evaporate. Here, the plant manager has disguised himself as the president of the company to amuse the employees.
I only came up here today to tell you how sorry we are that we had to close the plant.
Oh no!
But it was your own fault.
The company's generous 6-month notice, uncommon in this valley, explains only part of the workers' positive attitude.
You see, what you did wrong was last year you were the most efficient and the most profitable division.
Workers here are more individualistic and less willing to take a stand to defend their jobs. Unions have not made inroads in high tech, a situation that management is glad to see continue. Part of the reason for the workers' lack of interest in unions lies in the abundance of jobs.
We're
we're just all resigned to what is happening here, and we know it's happening, so we're all going to go out and find new jobs.
For most employees, it won't be difficult to find new jobs in the Valley, although they may not be in electronics. For others, age or a low demand for their skills could mean unemployment for some time.
Oh, I'm leaving lots of friends after I've been here 10 years. Anyone out there need an old administrative secretary? No.
A growing number of experts are concerned that high tech may be falling into the business of exporting jobs instead of products. Dr. Robert Noyce, co-inventor of the integrated circuit and one of the most respected voices in the Valley, worries about the consequences of sending manufacturing overseas.
Right now, if we look at the choices that people are making every day to establish new manufacturing businesses here or abroad, they are choosing to establish them abroad. And that will be a drain of American talent and American infrastructure that will be very deleterious to our economy in the years to come. So my interests have been focused on trying to reverse that trend, seeing if we cannot create the environment such that the decisions to establish manufacturing will be made in favor of America rather than in favor of the Far Eastern locations.
Some companies have delayed going offshore for their production. Priam, for example, is determined to maintain a strong U.S. manufacturing base. And this is how they plan to do it. One of Priam's robots. It assembles disk drives for computers. Through automation, the company hopes to increase productivity because the machines make fewer mistakes and can build products faster. Keeping jobs in this country, however, is not Priam's main concern.
The fact that individually the management team may feel very strongly about keeping jobs in this country or buy American or things of this nature, I really don't know that those are appropriate considerations for basing a business decision. Those are emotional responses. They may be appropriate responses, and I feel they are, but that's not how one decides to safeguard the stockholder's money and his investment.
At Priam, automation has not meant layoffs, largely because the process so far has been gradual. If it happens on a larger scale, it remains to be seen whether it will be possible to automate for higher efficiency and to increase employment. To some extent, Priam is going out on a limb because of the high cost of automation.
I think there's little risk that we're wrong, but the question's a much bigger one than Priam and disk drives. Hey, if you cannot build high-tech products of all, at least a high-tech product in this country, and be competitive in the worldwide market, what does that say for our economy and for the future of the nation? Okay, so I certainly hope we're right. Okay.
Priam also has a backup plan. If its competitors gain advantage by moving offshore, the company will probably follow. Automation and offshore manufacturing are only two of the trends that are changing Silicon Valley. The challenge for the companies during hard times especially is to be able to think beyond short-term solutions alone. Jerry Sanders of AMD.
What I am doing is saying these people are an investment, and we will keep them employed, although we will do whatever we have to do for cost cutting. Fundamentally, who gets laid off? These poor hourly workers. And if we lay off all the hourly workers at AMD, it only amounts to about 8% of our total sales, 6 or 8%. So since I'm losing more than 6 or 8%, if I didn't have a single hourly worker here and was making nothing, I would only save 6 or 8%. So my view is, why punish the people who can least stand the punishment? Now, the one question you have to ask, though, is, What happens if your general business is no longer a growth business? And that, of course, is something which high tech and information technologies shouldn't have to face.
In 1986, even harder times arrived, and AMD did lay off production workers, and Priam did decide to shift some manufacturing to Asia. High tech, the sunrise industry, is seen as the last great hope for the United States to keep its dominant place in the global economy. If it fails, not only will the companies and their workers suffer the consequences, but sooner or later it will have repercussions for all Americans and their standard of living. The challenge is to find a balance between conflicting needs.
There's enormous cost we pay for playing in the Silicon Valley game. The traffic, the stress on our lives, the pressures on marriages, the peer pressure for drugs, the declining environment, the inability of Silicon Valley to sympathize with the person who doesn't make it. Those are all the costs that we pay. We risk all that betting that we're going to be one of the winners. That's what it all comes down to. We're betting the store because this place is no longer the paradise it was, except to those who win the bet.
California, glamorous and easygoing. Nice climate, fertile land. In Silicon Valley, most of the growth has been fast but clean. Even some of the high-tech factories have dramatic architectural designs. But a chip factory, however beautiful, also has a different face. Solvents and acids are needed to clean components, to etch circuits, and to dissolve unwanted metals. So the factory has much in common with traditional chemical plants.
I'm wondering that's close enough, or whether we should be more down the center of it.
Lawyer Ted Smith is the chairman of the Silicon Valley Toxics Coalition, a group formed after a faulty underground tank leaked toxic chemicals in this semiconductor plant in South San Jose.
The right-hand side of the building now, where all those tanks are, underground was where the underground tank failed. And the neighborhood just beyond that is the Los Paseos neighborhood, where a lot of the health problems, particularly birth defects, showed up, just directly across the street.
Before it was removed, the tank had leaked almost 60,000 gallons, contaminating a public water well nearby. Residents of this neighborhood had been drinking the water. They suspected it as the cause of some of their health problems.
Because there's no health problems in our family. I had a very normal pregnancy, and I took good care of myself, and there's just no reason at all for Brian to have the problems that he did. And we also have another son who's 6.5, and he's perfectly normal.
In 1985, health agencies announced that birth defects and miscarriages had happened at unusually high levels, but stopped short of making a direct link with the water supply.
There was an unequivocal excess of miscarriages, congenital heart abnormalities, and other birth defects in the community around Fairchild Camera Company in 1980 and 1981. The cause or causes of these adverse pregnancy outcomes are not known.
Over 1,000 leaking underground tanks have been found in the valley, most from gasoline stations. But the attention focuses on the high-profile, high-tech industry.
It's the cream of the crop. It's not your little fly-by-night outfits. You've got Hewlett-Packard, you've got TRW, you've got Westinghouse, Signetics, National Semiconductor, Intel, Advanced Micro Devices, Synertech, Memorex, Dyson, NEC. I mean, they're all here. Teledyne. Virtually all of the best-known high-tech companies that are located in Silicon Valley have had chemical contamination problems.
These are the ones that are a real hazard to the environment. But they too would go to an above-ground tank in a vault that's lined with an epoxy. So that
Supervising engineer John Leopold worked at a major company at the time of a much publicized leak.
We thought for a long time that the soil could handle a lot of the pesticides, herbicides, industrial chemicals, and gasoline. It can't. It's giving up that, and we're seeing it in our water systems, okay? If we had known earlier, we probably would have taken more precaution. Now that we know, we're doing a cleanup campaign. It's going to take a long time, a lot of expense. I'm sure that most of the companies I've worked at over the 20 years in the industry are responsible companies. They don't do it because they're negligent. They may do it because it's not known, but now that we know, every company, everybody I know is doing what they can to control it.
Well, you must remember that the people that you're talking about in the Santa Clara Valley are employed by these industries. So let's not really represent it as industry being separate from the people. These are the people. The executives of these companies live in the valley, and the workers live in the valley. And so it's in their self-interest to protect their employees. And most of the industries certainly are sincerely interested in protecting the health of their employees and themselves.
Who would like one? Would you like one?
Yeah, I don't want any.
Sir, would you like some?
Have you gotten anybody to take it?
You can't give it away.
What is it?
It's water from the Silicon Valley.
Despite understandable concern, the main water supply for the valley is not contaminated yet. If expensive cleanup efforts succeed, it never will be. Though Ted Smith believes many companies have yet to tackle the cleanup as aggressively as it's needed. Inside the plants, those same chemicals are a potential hazard for the workers who spend each day in close proximity to them.
The manufacturing processes are completely dependent on the use of solvents, acids, and gases, all of which, under the appropriate circumstances, can be deadly. They can be deadly in an acute sense, in that an exposure to some of these gases can kill you right on the spot, or in a chronic sense, in the sense that many of these solvents have been shown to be carcinogens or cancer-producing, so that long-term exposure can cause cancer.
Despite uncertainty about long-term risks, workers inside the plants inevitably develop a sense of confidence.
It doesn't scare me because I wear rubber gloves and I've worked with acid for a long time, and I have safety glasses. And if you're careful with acid, then it won't hurt you.
Even if careful, accidents do happen, and a slight error may cause injury. In most cases, it's the small, unexpected mishap that hurts. In Romy Manau's case, it cost him half of his thumb.
I was cleaning some silicon boats, and then there's a pinhole in my rubber gloves, and it get through my thumb. When this kind of acid gets through you, and this is hydrofluoric acid, you don't feel it at that point in time. It takes 4 to 6 hours before you could really feel the acid.
We are a high-profile industry. People see those clean rooms, those immaculate rooms, you know, without a particle of dust, and a woman and a man in a bunny suit, you know, and we can't live up to that image, you know. I mean, it turns out that it's perfection, and life isn't perfection. I mean, I walk in the fab area, I breathe the same air, I drink the same water as the operators, and the truth is, we are extremely concerned about the safety and well-being of our employees, and as a matter of fact, it's documented that the semiconductor industry is one of the top 3 safest manufacturing industries in the United States.
Some statistics support the view that the chip industry is safer than heavier industry. However, a University of California study found that illnesses, as opposed to injuries, happen at a higher rate and suggests a link with workers' exposure to toxic chemicals. And a long-awaited study of women on production lines came up with some disturbing numbers. The rate of miscarriage for pregnant women was twice as high as for women not working with chemicals. Industry has reacted quickly, in some cases removing pregnant women from production lines. Dr. Joseph Ledoux.
I think that all industries have to solve
the issues of health and safety of the worker and health and safety of the surrounding community before they can thrive in the long run. And we can't afford another asbestos industry. We have to make health and safety an early and important issue in the emerging technologies.
Errors in these affairs are expensive in both economic and human terms. Some companies have spent millions of dollars cleaning up their contaminated sites. Prevention is better and less costly. Industry feels uneasy under the spotlight of criticism. It needs to attract young minds. And it will also need to expand. Until now, it's been welcome in most communities. But if clean air and clean water disappear from the valley, how many would trade their birthrights for greater wealth?
You can look at Silicon Valley and tell that no one really knew what they were doing as they went along. This place wouldn't be such a crazy quilt of companies and homes and traffic jams, and wouldn't be so haphazardly put together. There's no pattern to this town. And part of it's because everybody is here trying to make it big, trying to make some money, trying to build a company, try to buy some freedom. And it's just the fact that there are thousands of people like that over, 50 years that have created this place.
On the Bayshore Freeway toward the Silicon Valley, that traffic there is sluggish from Palo Alto to Mountain View. And the evening of the south...
A workday morning around Silicon Valley, in South San Jose to be exact. An accident has slowed down traffic towards the north, where the jobs are. For miles, slowly moving, just one person in each car.
With no particular place to go.
What makes this traffic jam special is that this is California, after all. Cars mean a lot here, more than in New York, Paris, or Tokyo. This is the land of you are what you drive. It's ironic that perhaps the biggest reason this high-tech mecca developed here was the quality of life the area offered to its early settlers. But after the explosive growth, that same attractiveness is fading fast, and people are getting frustrated.
Traffic has become heavier since I've been here. Just in 12 months, I've noticed that.
Traffic. I think that that's probably the only thing I don't like about this area.
It seems to be getting increasingly difficult to move around in the South Bay.
I think the world is eventually going to sort of turn its head to the valley and say, well, this is wonderful technology, but how does it improve the lives not of the world, not of the country, but of the people in the valley? Well, if you go ask some poor bastard that's spending 45 minutes in bumper-to-bumper traffic out there on 101 going to work each way every day, I don't think that person cares about those innovations. I think that person, what they care about is, why couldn't somebody get their act together to put a mass transit system encircling the Bay Area? Why couldn't somebody get their act together to put a bullet train out to Watsonville so that that person could afford a house?
Truly, the situation is a mild annoyance right now. The real problem is that there is no relief in sight. The automobile was the inspiration for urban planning here. It was put on a pedestal. But employment grew at 3 times what the planners prepared for, and so did the number of cars. This fertile land grows office buildings as it once grew fruit trees, despite plant closures and periodic recessions. Road developments have not kept pace.
This whole area is just going to be a disaster when the buildings are completed out here. They're projecting something like 140,000 workers.
Jim Lightbody heads Transportation 2000, a problem-solving agency set up by local city governments.
And you can see from the traffic right now that there's not much room to accommodate any more cars. So what's been shown is that the whole system is just going to come to a grinding halt.
Several approaches are being tried to alleviate the problem. Among them, the construction of a light rail system. Much skepticism surrounds the project. For most Californians, urban mass transit is an alien notion. Ironically, one solution could be a serious economic recession.
If we see that the growth stops here and that companies start moving out or people start leaving the area, then we could see some improvement.
The situation has gotten to the point where industry leaders themselves are having second thoughts about the urban growth.
There's no question that Silicon Valley has changed dramatically, and in my opinion, not always for the better. You have to recognize I was raised in this area. Much of the things that used to be attractive in the area, you know, the orchards, the rural environment, have changed. And from my point of view, some of the things have been overdone. I drive into the parking lot here in the morning and see a new 13-story tower right across from our driveway. I can't imagine on which highways those people are going to come to work. So we have a major problem here in that the infrastructure can't keep up with the accelerated rate of development we've tried to live with. We've been trying to get that message across to people so to be a little bit more planning, but it's a difficult message, it seems, to get across, especially in the fragmented political environment that exists of several little communities that have each grown up to saturate its local environment now.
Short-sighted competition between some of the 15 cities in the valley has contributed to the problems of growth. Industrial and commercial development bring in more tax revenues than residential construction. So each city wants to attract companies rather than provide housing for their workers.
Each of the cities is looking to get as much industry and commercial and industrial areas, and they're not putting in much housing. So each city is competing with the other in terms of getting development. And the effect is that, that nobody's paying much attention to the regional problems that result from the development that's occurring.
The cities, with their 1.5 million inhabitants, are separated by political divisions which reflect the realities of 25 years ago, before Silicon Valley came to encompass them all. The goal is continued economic growth. Sometimes they cooperate, but most of the time it seems as if they're grabbing at each other's throats. Another consequence of growth can be seen here. This is the Golden Triangle, a prime development area. In 1975, an acre of land cost $50,000. 10 years later, it was up to $1 million. Land values have also affected the price of housing. The median price of a house in the valley is 60% higher than the average for the United States.
It was a shock 3 or 4 weeks ago when I first came to San Jose to consider the job and discovered that to replace my $66,000 house in Tucson, Arizona, I'd have to almost triple the price of the house here just to stay even with what I had in Arizona. That was a shock, yes.
What strikes the middle class as a high price is completely out of reach for those with low incomes. Furthermore, rentals are also affected, and a new class of people has appeared, those who work in the valley but can't afford to pay its prices, what Jennifer Luna Briganti calls the changing face of the homeless.
There are people who are making salaries at $4 and $5 an hour that are dealing with escalating rents, $900 to $1,000 a month, times 3 in order to move in. There are single-head household women who have been evicted from their housing when it's been sold. There are people that never expected to be homeless, young couples just starting out. And I think this valley has changed tremendously in the last 10 to 20 years without taking into account the people that have lived here. And in that, they are showing us what I think is going to be a problem in the future when a very sophisticated new industry moves into an existing area.
Jennifer Luna Briganti is the director of the Family Living Center, a shelter where up to 41 families stay each night. This is the last stop for those families that were barely making it and slipped and fell.
We slept in the car for over a month, on and off. Then the police told us about this place, because the police found us sleeping in the car. So they told us about this place. They sent us here, and we stayed here for about a month and a half. In order for us to get an apartment, we had to come up with over $1,100 for the apartment. It's really tough when you think about it, because you really can't get that much money in a lump sum, because you do have to survive, you have to eat. And it was a struggle, but if both parties are working and really trying hard, you can do it. You have to set aside a whole lot of things, you know, and you have to give up a lot of things, and you can't eat as well as you want to. You know, you have to really budget it out, and it's hard. But we came up with it, so December 1st, we should be moving into our own place.
High-tech companies are the largest, but not the only employers in the valley. Some have to work for support services or secondary industries, and they aren't paid any better because it's Silicon Valley.
I've worked 2 different places, Burger King and McDonald's, and there's no way I could have rented a place around here on the wage they pay me. There's no way, because they only pay me like 10, 15 cents over minimum. And I mean, I can understand, I can comprehend where they're coming from. They can't afford to pay you anymore, but then the landlords around here ought to understand too and know you can't pay anymore.
All around the shelter, shiny new commercial buildings sit empty. A glut of an estimated 30 million square feet of office space has flooded the market. This is one of the many new business parks built on the site of a major cannery in the valley. All that's left is this monument to the demise of what was once some of the richest farmland in the world. The freeway traffic jams, the housing crisis, and the homeless. They all look at the monument and brace themselves for the next wave of explosive growth.
You have to put the Silicon Valley lifestyle into perspective. If you keep in mind that people here are on the average under 30, they tend to be college educated, and they are in jobs that pay large amounts of money with the prospect of huge amounts of money, you begin to realize that this place is sort of an extension of college. This is sort of, in the most extreme case, this is a giant animal house when you get right down to it. So the problems of drugs, well, you find a lot of drug use among people who fit this profile. The frenetic lifestyle, the hedonism, the hard work, same thing. It fits the profile of this type of people.
Work hard, play hard, reinforcing the idea of well-deserved rewards after a productive day at the office has made many merchants wealthy. This dealership of high-status automobiles, for example, is the biggest volume seller in the United States. The reason? This area's household buying income is 40% higher than in the rest of the country.
People who are searching for contentment and who don't have a lot of family here and who've moved from other parts of the country, I think are not establishing roots. What they're doing is they're looking for material possessions. They're looking from getting a new car, from taking a trip to Hawaii. They're always looking for what money can buy. And unfortunately, many people find, after living this life for a long time, that the individual isn't very much by him or herself. That it becomes a very hollow existence. However, it takes many, many, many years, I think, because the idea is I just don't have enough material goods, or that I'm not as successful as I could be in business, without taking a look at maybe that there are other ways of defining success.
It's Sunday evening, 2 weeks before Christmas. In a deserted office building, a man and his computer carry on the tradition of hard work and long hours common to the valley. The pressures to make it big, driven by the knowledge that somebody out there must be working while one is taking time off, pushes people to work 80 and 90 hours a week.
I went through an extended period, first with one company and another, where I just found myself putting in the 80, 90-hour weeks. And you know, there was an enormous personal cost, a cost to my marriage, my health, certainly my perspective. But then when I went out on my own, I found that I'm kind of naturally inclined that way, I guess, a workaholic.
This obsession with work, many times expected by the employers, takes its toll on family life.
While there's divorce, there's a lot of wife battering that goes on. Men become very angry that the women are upset with them for the time spent away from home, and then plus the pressures. I see a lot of men who, the pressures of working in this valley. This place is very, very competitive. I mean, the material goals out there of big bucks that people are looking for and that are not getting all of the time. That puts a pressure on people. And many, many times that's taken out within the family itself.
The divorce rate here is one of the highest in the United States. That is just one of the signs that this high-pressure environment is taking its toll. For other signs, one can visit Lieutenant Lansdowne of the San Jose Police Department.
It's our belief that there's around $500 million worth of drugs being purchased and used in the South Valley area, San Jose proper.
That would make drugs one of the largest firms.
Oh, absolutely. They would easily make the Fortune 500. And they were just talking a very small area. We have a population of around 700,000 people using that amount of drugs, a tremendous amount of expense. And we find that what we have is a very affluent society, a very fluent group of people who are able to afford many of the more exotic drugs, cocaine being one of those. Several studies have been done with people who are involved in Silicon Valley who have actually turned down promotions because they're afraid of what it will result in, more money and more ability to buy the cocaine and ultimate death.
They turn down promotions because they fear they'll be able to afford more cocaine?
Absolutely. One of the things that actually controls the drug use by individuals is their inability to purchase more of the drug because they just don't have the financial resource.
I was spending, I'd say about $200 a day, to be honest, you know. The only way you can afford to do a habit like that is this steal or deal. There's no way that you could work and pay for a habit like that, you know.
Don and Christine have been drug abusers and are now trying to break the habit. They have both worked for high-tech companies in different capacities.
I used to sell a lot of drugs, you know, and I know I used to sell a lot of drugs to the people in the industry, you know. And it was big business, you know. I mean, people wanted it, you know. That's all there was to it. It was easier to sell drugs at work than it was to do it at home. It was safer almost, you know.
What I would do is I'd go in the bathrooms and I'd put my purse on the ground and I'd put everything on the back of the seat so that you couldn't tell what I was doing. And I'd get my little water and my cottons and I'd take off my belt and I'd tie myself off and yeah, I'd inject it in the bathrooms.
You know you're not going to get fired because they can't afford to have you end in the middle of this job. You know, it's worth a lot of money to these corporations. They're willing to put you in rooms and say, you know, they'll even put you there by yourself and say, you do what you've got to do, just please get this design done. You know, we need it by a certain amount of time and it has to be done. If I was a businessman, you know, and I was making money off somebody, I wouldn't fire them either. As long as they were making money for me, that's what it's all about. Right? That's where the real problem is there's no way that you can fire some of these people. Sure, if they were working on the line, you could replace them in a day, but in the high-tech industry, if you got, and it goes all the way up, presidents, vice presidents, you know, some of your high-tech personnel, you know, they use drugs. You know, that's socially acceptable in this area, you know, in Silicon Valley. I mean, there's a lot of money, and they can afford to.
How pervasive are drugs in the valley?
It varies enormously from company to company. There are some large, well-managed companies like IBM that have minimal problems because they have faced the problem and they have taken steps to advance a corporate policy and they have some good programs. There are other companies where it's epidemic, where, for example, one company of some 400 employees, we estimate that 85% of the people are abusing drugs.
85%?
85%.
I used to work for this supervisor who was so loaded out of his mind. He used to walk into the wall, walk into the post. He used to wear sunglasses to work.
In the middle of the night.
In the middle of the night. And I used to keep telling my boss, there's something wrong with this man. He kept saying, no, no, Gloria, it can't be. Just have patience, he's new. And it turned out, you know, when they finally realized this person has a problem, he OD'd, and he was OD'd right on the line and was taken out of there. It was kind of a big joke because there was this one guy who was a cook in the cafeteria. And supposedly he used to sell a lot of drugs over the counters. When you used to order your hamburger or something, you'd get it underneath the bun.
What was the company's attitude about drugs? Were they come down hard on it? Were they cool on it? Did they ignore it?
As far as I know, I really don't know what they were doing at all, if they were trying to do anything to stop the drugs in there.
I have met with presidents, CEOs, and some of the top executives of some of these companies, and the CEO turns to his staff and says, I didn't even know this was a problem. How many people are using drugs? And his own people say 35, 40%, and so on. We find the reaction of management in the electronic industry to be just about the same as the reaction of Hollywood, of the entertainment industry, and the professional sports industry. When drugs were first exposed as a problem, they denied, until finally they couldn't deny anymore. They were inundated, overwhelmed with this problem, and now finally have begun to take steps to control it.
A company is nothing but a reflection of the society that it lives in. If it's a 10% problem in the society, it's a 10% problem in all companies that are hiring out of that society. As to the best way to handle it, I don't have an answer to that. I'm not sure that anyone does. Companies have to decide what's best for them and their workforce. We have very definite policies about the use of drugs, okay? I'm not as concerned about what people do on a weekend, but I'm very concerned about what they do in the normal work hours when they're down there working around machinery, their safety, things of this nature, as well as the quality of our product and so on and so forth.
Quality is a crucial issue here. Many of the Valley's products are used by customers that demand high reliability: aerospace, the military, or the health industry. Potential harm is higher than in other kinds of manufacturing. At least 2 large companies in the Valley have started controversial drug screening programs, hoping to keep a drug-free environment.
But just about anything that you put into your body has some effect on your body.
Another approach being tried is workplace education. Here, employees of a large group of automobile dealerships attend a compulsory drug awareness session given by consultant Dr. Angela Brown.
I find cocaine use and cocaine addiction so prevalent in Silicon Valley scares me. We have here in Silicon Valley people who have enough to eat, who have nice clothes, who have nice cars, who have good educations. They have all the opportunities anyone could want. They're some of the most fortunate people on the planet, and they are in trouble with drugs. I want everybody to know that it's killing us. It can kill one individual, and it can kill a whole society.
It's very easy to focus on the problems of a place like this and take for granted what makes this place glorious. Silicon Valley has risen from almost nothing, from a place of orchards 25 years ago, to a business community that employs nearly 1 million people. It provides them with jobs and livelihoods. It's given opportunities to the most creative, inventive engineering minds of our generation. To simply focus on the problems of this place is foolish. This valley is so much more. If anything's worth saving, Silicon Valley's worth saving.
To have such a concentration of brain power and technological creativity in one place has been rare through history. Not only were products like video games invented here, but entire industries created, as with the personal computer. It's reasonable to hope that at least some of this talent will be applied to solving the area's problems.
That's where the minds and the spirits and the hearts of the leaders of Silicon Valley has been, is the creation of those industries. And maybe that's where it should have been. And maybe that's where most of it should continue to be. But it's time for at least a fraction of their thought and their consciousness to start to be more reflected back into the world that we've created for ourselves here in the Valley.
Carlos right there, who's my wrestling coach.
Throughout the valley, some people are trying to make a difference. They are a minority, but they offer the seeds for the birth of a more balanced community.
We'll be working together with the Cambodian community real close, and I really like...
A monthly meeting takes place here. Grassroots organizations come to share their problems, ask for help, and to offer solutions.
We can't have that stuff going on. I go to community.
It goes on all the time.
But we can change it. You know why?
Well, I'm changing it by doing it myself.
I know, but we need to change it together. We have to keep working together.
Anybody got an idea about where? Where do you see the need in San Jose? The biggest need in San Jose?
The biggest need in San Jose is where the kids are.
Bill Ramos has worked with minority youth for 17 years, providing them with alternatives to drugs and delinquency. He's been effective and enjoys the support of those who know the program. On another level, artists are beginning to look at the area with interest. There's a lot of money here that can afford to support them by buying their works. But their presence indicates the beginning of a strong local art base that can serve as food for the spirit in an area that has been described as a cultural wasteland.
When a new technology develops, it's equally important, along with marketers that move in and say, how can we make a buck off this, that the artists move in and say, what can we do that ultimately raises people's consciousness? It's an act of discovery.
I wanna have everything. I wanna have everything. I wanna.
The performing arts have developed strongly in recent years. Here, a local musical comedy group takes the Valley's most common stereotype, the young engineer turned millionaire, and makes it satirical comment.
Now I'm 16 and no one's on to me. I run my high school from a 12-inch CRT. I'm gonna sell the football team soon, 'cause I'm a teenage. Whoa, 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 computer tycoon.
Steve Wozniak has long been a friend of the citizens, and particularly the children in the city of San Jose. And I think this is probably, in my memory, the most significant type of contribution, the most significant type of philanthropic gesture probably that's ever been received by the city of San Jose.
Hometown engineer Steve Wozniak had just committed $2 million of his fortune for the construction of a museum. The source of his money, the invention of the Apple computer, has changed the way people see him.
At least I can say, here's sort of what I found good in the world. And other people listen now. Because of Apple, the big myth of Apple and the success of Apple, of what it meant to people, and it became sort of one of the big catchy headlines of the success of high technology and the good side of the high-tech force came about, and all of a sudden, whatever I said somehow carried more weight. It had more authority.
Perhaps more significant than the size of his museum donation, the simple words he spoke at the ceremony reflected his attempt to find what is important.
I was born in San Jose, and I read books to my kids.
And in the books, I noticed that all the Mickey Mouse characters, all the Disney characters, they win a race and they get a check and they go out and spend their check on a baseball field for orphans. And we all, and we all were kids. We all were kids, and we read these stories, and we all believed, and we all knew what was right and what was wrong. And, I think back on stories like that, and I just, it's real obvious where it comes from.
The balance between work and family, between the self and the community, has been struck by many people in the Valley. Whether at church, or through neighborhood friendships, or through political activism, the search for what is important continues. If this place is the new model for industrial development, it will need to meet those challenges before it can be truly successful. In Silicon Valley, burdened with the weight of success, the search continues, the balance not yet struck between what is important and what is not.